May I stand? I fight better standing. I say those words when testifying to the House Judiciary Committee in 1969. I enter the chamber and sit, and when it's my turn, I stand. That's when the chairman says, "Miss Rankin, you may remain seated." I suppose he does that in deference to my advanced age. I'm 88 years old. They ask my opinion about the Electoral College. I'm against it. The Electoral College has become a sham. I believe that every vote should count as every vote. Do you see this ballot box? This is my favorite box. Oh, I know some women might prefer a jewelry box or a hat box. I've had plenty of those. But for me, the ballot box symbolizes the right and duty for all of us to vote to determine the government we want. My life has been determined by the votes I have cast. While in Congress, I voted against entry into both world wars. I voted with my feet when I led the Jeannette Rankin Brigade. I voted for the 19th Amendment. But oh, I'm getting ahead of myself, as I always do. I'm Jeannette Rankin. Not a household word or as well known as I ought to be, which is why I am delighted that Beth Rankin Urech is writing about me. Yes, Beth did the research and learned that her great-grandfather and my grandfather were brothers. So we're related. I like the idea of her voice speaking my words. My story begins in Montana, where I was born on a ranch in 1880, just outside Missoula. I know the bright blue skies and broad horizons have shaped my outlook. In the West, men and women worked side by side. They shared responsibilities, but women didn't have the vote. That was wrong. Eventually, I do something about that. My father, John Rankin, a carpenter, came from Canada and Scotland with a toolkit and the will to succeed. My mother, Olive Pickering, arrived from New Hampshire, a school teacher. They met, married. A year later, I arrived. When Beth was doing research at the Jeannette Rankin Peace Center in Missoula, the director gave her my christening dress. Look, isn't this sweet? Well, she said as long as Beth and I were related, she thought Beth ought to have it. You know, this dress may have been worn by more than just me. I am the eldest of 7 children. 6 girls and 1 boy. We always called Wellington the boy. As a girl, what I loved most was riding alongside my father as he surveyed the ranch. One day, I was standing at the corral and a horse trotted back with a bloody gash on its shoulder. The ranch hands just stood there. I could tell they were getting ready to put that poor horse out of its misery. Wait! I ran inside and came back with a needle and thread. I sewed up that bloody gash. I saved the horse's life. Another time, Father had gotten farm machinery from Missoula to lift the hay into the hayloft, and the pulley mechanism jammed. The ranch hands just stood there. Wait, I think I can figure this out. Look, we have to move the pulley over. Yes, now it works. My sister Philena died at 9 years of age. I was just 11. Our mother grieved deeply, and from then on it was pretty much up to me to raise my siblings. Later, they said I was bossy. Well, of course I was bossy. I had to be. I graduate from college in 1902 and write in my journal, go, go, go. It doesn't matter where, just go. But it takes me almost a decade to figure out where. At age 24, I go east for the first time. Wellington is at Harvard Law School and falls ill. I nurse him back to health. Wellington gets well. We are invited to Teddy Roosevelt's inaugural ball, dancing and beautiful ball gowns. I am an accomplished seamstress, and I love looking at the president's wife is in a pale blue brocaded satin gown with a little dip at the waist. Exquisite. Then we travel to New York City and stay at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. I love promenading up and down Fifth Avenue, but I am appalled by the filth and slums. I return home, but I'm not a ranch girl anymore. The poverty that I have seen in Washington and New York and Boston haunts my dreams. I head west to San Francisco, which is also rampant with squalor. I stumble upon a settlement house on Telegraph Hill. I work there. I begin reading the famous social worker, Jane Addams. I decide I'll become a social worker to eradicate the suffering that surrounds me. I go back to New York City and study at the School of Philanthropy on East 22nd Street. Morning, classes. Afternoon, field work. I am assigned to the Jewish Italian district near the Bowery, the happiest neighborhood in all of New York City, despite the misery. One day, I have to take a 3-year-old boy to the orphanage. His mother has 2 younger children. The father has gone missing. She doesn't seem to mind when I take him. Oh, he is so full of laughter and joy. And as we leave, she just waves, bye-bye. Before long, I realized my calling isn't to be a social worker, but to work for social change. I go to the state of Washington. I study. I become involved in the suffragist movement. I'm an excellent organizer. I get sent to Ohio, Michigan, Florida. Then I say, wait, why not get the vote for women in my home state? To do that, I travel 9,000 miles all over Montana. Later, John F. Kennedy wrote that I traveled by horseback. That was just a Wild West myth. I traveled by train, and when I can't go on the train, I drive. Oh, Wellington teaches me how to drive his Model T. Oh boy, I love driving fast. Let's go! I speak everywhere. On street corners, outside saloons and dance halls. I tell the men, you men of the West aren't afraid of your women? And you're not afraid to give your women the vote? I tell school children, go home and ask your fathers why they don't want your mothers to vote. It works. Women get suffrage in Montana in 1914. I need a break. I travel to New Zealand, which is the first country ever to give women the vote. I work there as a dressmaker. Then I return to Montana and run for the House of Representatives. The first time I am ever able to vote in a federal election, I vote for myself. But have I won? No one can tell me. I call the local newspaper. I don't give my name. Hello, editor. I'd like some election results. Woodrow Wilson won? Good. Rankin? You don't know? Thank you. 3 days later, I find that I have one. And the following morning, when I open my front door, the yard is filled with reporters, flashbulbs flashing everywhere. I say, I am not coming out here again until all of you journalists vacate my yard. You know, that very day, I may have been the most famous woman in the world because I was the first female anywhere in the world to be elected to a national legislative body. En route to Washington, I stop off and speak at Carnegie Hall in New York City to an audience of 3,000 people. Later, a reviewer writes, she wore a simple frock with a wide band of fur at the bottom. Why do people spend so much time talking about what we women wear? The reviewer continues, Rankin's face was always smiling. Her voice seemed as if it was about to break into the laughter of irrepressible youth. I'm 36 years old. He continued, she might have been 19 or 23. I'm 36 years old, but judging from her words, she must have been much older. Well, I'm only 36. I tell the audience, I want to represent the men, women, and children of my state, but I feel a special duty to represent all the women in this grand country. The mothers who don't want their boys to go to war, the wives who can't afford groceries, the little girls growing up in states where women do not have the vote. When I arrive in Washington, D.C., the timing is momentous. President Wilson asks for a vote whether to enter the war. My first vote, the very first vote ever cast by a woman in Congress. My suffragist friends say, vote for war, Jeannette, or you will set our cause back a decade. Men say, vote like a man, vote for war. The first roll call, I do nothing. The second roll call. I want to stand by my country, but I cannot vote for war. I vote no. I am one of 50 representatives and senators. Later it was said that I cried. I did not cry. While in Congress, I do put forth the 19th Amendment, giving suffrage to women across America, and I vote for it. It passes in the House, dies in the Senate, eventually passes in both houses. But when it's ratified 2 years later, I'm no longer in Congress, but I am the only woman who voted to give women the vote. That's what I'm proudest of. I also clean up the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. A young woman worker comes to me. Miss Rankin, we need your help. We are printing Liberty bonds and currency, and we are working 10-hour shifts with no overtime. We have to lift our arms several hundred times every day. Some of us have fainted. 2 girls have been institutionalized because of tension. Others have been threatened with sexual assault. Well, this is not right. I go to the Bureau and talk to the director, who says, Miss Rankin, everything is running smoothly. I doubt that. I invite the girls to my apartment. Sunday morning, 30 show up. They sign affidavits describing the abuses they are suffering. Then I take the affidavits to Treasury Secretary McAdoo, who says, Well, good morning, Miss Rankin. I don't have a lot of time for you today. I'm just getting ready to leave for a boating party. Boating party? Sir, I demand that the Bureau be put on an 8-hour work schedule by the 5th of July. Oh, the 5th of July is just the very day we're getting back from our vacation. He leaves. His assistant walks in. Miss Rankin, you do not understand how things are done here in Washington. You're new. You don't realize it takes us a long time to reorganize schedules and make changes. Sir, I have affidavits here, and if you do not instate an 8-hour workday, I will turn them over for a congressional investigation. I leave. I get back to my office. The phone rings. Hello, Rankin speaking. There'll be a meeting today at 1 o'clock? Good. The girls will be excused to attend? Good. I'll be right over. Good. I return to the Bureau, but I'm afraid that the girls won't turn up for fear of losing their jobs. But when I arrive, 200 girls line the corridors. They testify for several hours, and then we're all released. That night, the newspaper states, 8-hour day at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. You know, that might be the swiftest change that's ever happened in Washington. Oh, I could have accomplished so much more, but when a country is at war, very little else gets done. I am not reelected. In November 1918, armistice is declared, and the following spring, I traveled to Switzerland for the Second Women's International Conference on Peace and Freedom. I tell our hosts, we are so grateful to be here in Zurich, and we see in this clear atmosphere that war truly is the supreme folly. And we denounce the Treaty of Versailles, which will only create conditions for future warfare. Back in America, people are sometimes surprised that I spend as much time as I do in Georgia. Well, why not? The climate is mild, and it's only 600 miles from D.C., where I continue to speak and work. I like my life in rural Georgia, in a little house without indoor plumbing or electricity. When I'm not expecting visitors, I can spend the day in my bathrobe, drinking buttermilk. When my lovely oriental carpet gets old, I just take little pots of red and black paint. I sit on the floor and I retrace the design. Well, not that I couldn't afford more. Wellington manages my finances. But why install plumbing which costs as much as a plane ticket to India? Besides which, I can just step outside and dip my pail into the well. In 1928, I found the Georgia Peace Society, and I use that as my headquarters as I continue to work for peace. Whenever I'm asked, I speak. You know, in the course of my career, I gave over 5,000 speeches. I am considered feminine and forceful, controversial, and ahead of my time. In 1939, I testify to the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I insist the first step towards fascism is to decrease or ignore congressional powers. At the age of 60, I decide to run for Congress again. I return to Montana. I plan to speak at 52 high schools. I write and tell the principals when I will be arriving. I don't put a return address on the envelope. I'm not an isolationist, but I don't want our boys to lose their lives on foreign soil. My campaign pledge: prepare to the limit for defense. Keep our men out of Europe. It works. I am re-elected in 1940 to the House of Representatives from the state of Montana. Fiorello LaGuardia wires from New York City. Ah, Jeannette, congratulations. I always knew you would win. Love, Fiorello. It's true. He and I once were an item, and one time he slid his arm around my waist and told my sister, "Edna, you don't know how hard I tried to get this gal to marry me." December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. But no hesitation from me this time around. I say, as a woman, I cannot go to war, and I refuse to send anyone else. I vote no. I am the sole dissenting vote. Wellington says, Jeannette, Montana is against you 110%. I'm not re-elected. For a while, I just sort of disappear. Then I get a wonderful idea. I will build a home for older women who don't want to spend the rest of their lives either alone or with their children. I'll call it the Roundhouse. Yes, a roundhouse with 10 pie-shaped bedrooms around a central communal area. Oh, we can have a little lake and a garden and, well, women stop and take a look, but no one moves in. I do continue to travel. I travel several times to India. I am fascinated by Gandhi's peace principles. Oh, I would like so much to have met him, but he was assassinated before my last visit. That is a terrible regret. Oh, I am so disillusioned. I wonder if my life has been in vain. The phone rings. Hello, Rankin speaking. You'd like me to lead a women's peace march to protest Vietnam? You'll call it the Jeannette Rankin Brigade? Oh, I may be 87, but you can count me in. Let's march. We march. Judy Collins sings, "This land is your land." We march, the leading feminists of the day. Coretta Scott King, Julie Belafonte, Ruby Dee, Rosa Parks, Jessica Mitford, Jane Spock, Susan Sontag, and behind us 5,000 women. We march from Union Station to the Capitol. A man asks if I can envision ever having a woman president. Oh, yes, it's inevitable, even desirable. Men will be delighted. A man inherently likes to be governed by a woman. Matrimony proves that. Back in Georgia, I befriend a restless young law student who pitches his tent on my yard at Shady Grove. Oh, 2 days later, I invite him in. John Kirkley cooks and cleans, organizes my schedule, drives me every place. I repay his law school debt of $3,000. My friends are alarmed. Oh, I tell them, do you think I can be taken in by a 29-year-old boy? Well, of course, I know he's using me, but I'm using him. And at the age of 91, I can do as I please with my money. I continue to promote political reform, abolishing the Electoral College, instating direct preferential voting to elect the president and the vice president. Some call it ranked voting. No, not Rankin voting, but that would be nice. In February 1972, I am named the world's outstanding living feminist. I am the first one inducted into the Susan B. Anthony Hall of Fame. I speak to 1,500 women. I say, women must devote all their energies in gaining political offices. We need women to solve the major social disgraces that exist in this country. You know, I worked for suffrage for a decade and got it. I worked for peace for 55 years and haven't come close. At the end of my life, when I'm asked, Jeannette, would you do it all over again? I say, oh yes, I'd do it all over again, and next time I'd be nastier. So, in closing, remember to register and vote. And when you're not voting, stand up and speak up for what you believe in. Then you can say with me, may I stand? I fight better standing.